It is underway as promised, and joining us today, the man, the myth, the legend, the greatest golfer in this room. Ask him, he'll tell you. SHOPO President, Bobby Cavaco.
Oh, good morning, Rick. How are you? Thank you for that intro.
Happy
Monday.
Happy Monday. Two words that don't go together well.
Mark's favorite words.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. Brother Nick, aloha to you. Let me try you again. Uno mas.
Good morning, and thanks for having us back.
There it is. I'd like for him to sing a John Denver song. I think he would just be, that'd be awesome. Nick's going, John Denver, did he play for the Bulls too?
I think, yeah, it's with some guy named Pippen or something. It was a while ago.
I love it. We have a special guest in studio. Brother Bobby, would you do the intros, please?
Yeah, so we have the Vice President of the San Francisco Police Officers Association, Kevin Worrell.
Mm-hmm.
He's here on some time off away from the job and his duties in San Francisco. And we welcome him to the show for some perspective and commentary on San Francisco items.
Sure. Love it. Love it. Kevin, aloha to you and welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Tell you what, let's get to know each other a little bit better. Would you mind sharing about yourself, please?
Absolutely. So I've got about 23 years in with San Francisco Police. Currently work patrol. Swing watch. I work in the North Beach section of San Francisco.
Italiano.
Yeah. So I've walked the beat. I've for many years, and now I'm back on patrol. Works with my duties within the union.
Full disclosure, I lived in the Bay Area for years, lived in the city, Sunset, and then also by Union Square. I would not want to be there right now.
That is my district.
That's here,
yeah.
and I loved it. I lived, I can't recall, Stockton and Bush, I think, I love the city. I love San Francisco. Always have, always will, and help us to understand. The recent news cycles have indicated San Francisco a little bit under duress. Would you agree with a statement like that, Kevin?
I would, because we're seeing major businesses in our shopping district in the Union Square area, all leaving. North Face, right, which is a San Francisco company, started there, originated there, and that's their flagship store, just left. Macy's, which is right in Union Square, is talk about leaving. Nordstrom's is gone, right? Almost all of the Walgreens in my district have all folded up because of this retail theft that is, and it's organized retail theft that's occurring in our city.
It's astounding because they were iconic locations in the square. I would go and do my shopping at Macy's. And you have a turnaround for cable cars that are just right there. That Walgreens on the corner, is that one that has closed too?
Those Walgreens are still open, but all the outlier ones downtown have closed. The CVS's.
Yeah, my goodness. How has all this happened?
Well, about maybe a little bit more than 10 years ago, a proposition passed, Prop 47, which has had dire consequences that we've seen now, which, in the past we were able to arrest if the person who was stealing and just these petty thefts had served time in jail prior to that, right? So there was a hammer on him, right? So this Prop 47 changed that, and there's no longer a hammer. So there's now a new proposition. They're looking to amend that Prop 47 this year. And so we'll see if the voters agree with this, and the amendments are looking to just put back, some sort of, I would say, they've also tied in, drug abuse as well, right? So getting help for these and mandating these people to go to drug court if it is a drug issue, and also putting a bit more of a hammer on the petty theft, so we can, attack this. This is just one level to attack it.
Sure. So, Bobby, Nick, I just want to kind of establish, and Kevin, correct me if this is inaccurate, is that 2024 approximate population San Francisco proper is 750,000. Metro San Francisco, 3.3 million. There's been an exodus over a period of years that you've been losing residents, and that down, the latest number I had, down 4% from last year already. And so I bring that up for the parallels between San Francisco, which is a peninsula, covered water three sides, and obviously Oahu and our neighbor islands. So Bobby, Nick, the correlation, the things that we have in common with what Kevin's describing. Would you share?
Sure. So I can remember 30 years ago, people in Hawaii who were looking to move to the mainland often considered San Francisco as a place to go because of those commonalities. We were just talking outside a few minutes ago, and the size of the municipality with regards to the size of its police force is pretty much identical to the size of the police force here in Honolulu. A lot of similarities there. We've said it several times on this show before. Hawaii often ends up following mainland trends slowly. It takes some years for them to get here, but eventually they do. And our politicians do follow political party ideals and lines. So if something gets introduced somewhere on the mainland, eventually it'll trickle its way down here. Unfortunately, often by the time it trickles its way down here, we've already seen the idea pass and fail on the mainland. And I think we can all say that we're seeing those ideas fail, and San Francisco, unfortunately, is affected by it. And again, a call to arms. We cannot let those kinds of things happen here.
Amen. Brother Bobby?
Did they pass bail reform in San Francisco, Kev?
There is bail reform, yes.
Just to get,
yeah, thanks.
Just to get maybe a parallel perspective, if somebody goes into, Walgreens or retail establishment, select some items, and then walks out and gets stopped by SFPD, is it a mandatory cite and release, or do you guys still have the discretion of making the arrest, taking them in for processing, and then setting bail?
No, it's for all petty thefts, it's a cite and release unless there's something other that comes along with it, a warrant, or but if it's a petty theft, it's then the business has to also want to press charges as well. So I mean, we can't even if we on-view it, the business we still need a victim.
Is there a dollar amount? Ours is $750 in value in a shoplifting theft, and consequently, San Francisco similar dollar amount to Constitution?
It's $950, but when we talked about the changes earlier, it went from $450 up to $950.
Oh, similar to what happened with us.
So, but I mean, every time we got to call it Saks Fifth Avenue, everything's a felony there too. So,
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Bail reform. We skirted a proposed law in our session that would have, Nick, describe what that would have done. I mean, there would have been virtually zero consequence at all for any type of this activity.
Sure. So following the idea of being able to just simply cite people and let them go on the spot, bail reform would have given our courts the opportunity to essentially say, you know what, if these people don't meet these extra high criteria, is that we can essentially let them go immediately and assume that they're going to be good and show up to court when we tell them to show up to court.
Mm-hmm. That's probably the most important question, sidebar, is did you guys sign Ayuk yet, or what's going on? Come on.
As of April 1st, rumors were flying that he was going to Pittsburgh. So, I hope not. I kind of like the way everything's unfolded this past year.
Man, I'll tell you.
Other than the end result.
Other than that, that's off to the side. That cat is one of the best offensive tools you have, and
he's had to work for it too, because he was put in his place early on, and I think it was a wake up call for him becoming a professional.
As you see, professional football is a common theme on the SHOPO Hour, and understandably so. Brother Bobby, there are a series of town hall meetings that are underway, headed up by Mayor Rick. Have you been apprised of what's top of mind with our folks? There have been two, another one this Thursday, of feedback from the general public.
I think the feedback has been pretty well received. The community likes the setting that the mayor brings in and the opportunity of them bringing forth their issues. The one thing I like about it is that he brings the department heads with him. So when the community has their issues that they present to the mayor, instead of him trying to give them a general, answer or whatnot, you can actually have somebody from a specific department that it's relative to assist with whatever issue they're bringing them up.
Because part of that, and also here and other venues, is really identifying. Because, and correct me again, I don't want to misspeak, we are told consistently that crime is down here at home, but we just are treated to a myriad of stories and cases. And now the escalation of shooting, Chief Joe acknowledged that there was, a 63% increase in shooting crimes? That's pretty astounding. Do you have similar situations? I understand in the Mission, there's quite a tempo of violent gun crimes. And how do we meld the two, Bobby, Nick, with San Francisco? Grave concerns in one particular district, but we're seeing an uptick we've never seen before.
I appreciate the mayor and the department heads going out and speaking to people directly. I think it's a very good idea, and I applaud them for doing so. Despite the fact that crime may be going down in certain areas, I think we all have to acknowledge, and we can all agree, that these particularly heinous crimes or these crimes of high notoriety seem to be the ones that are strangely escalating. So you have a de-escalation in some areas, but you have an increase in others. I can't quite personally put my finger on it. Been asked for an explanation from people anecdotally. I just don't know. It's concerning. It's gravely concerning. It's even more difficult for us to handle given the nationwide shortage of law enforcement. That's of great concern as well. And those are the only parallels that I can put on it right now. From my point of view, I've been watching it with a lot of concern, just like everyone else.
Brother Bobby?
I think it has multiple facets that are causes of it, whether it's from the increase in fentanyl or drug use, and you compound that with the economic condition that we're in with the high cost of living, and along with the RCP population, and then you tie in the laws and whether or not they're prosecuted by the prosecutor's office or the AG. It just makes a pot for for crime to rise. But we should just be concerned with which crimes are on the rise and which crimes it seem to be happening in certain areas, and then you address it that way.
What's interesting, in a news report today, San Francisco officials say crime is falling, and they cite first quarter 24, that there's been fewer cumulative cases. But Kevin, would you share some insight too? Because we hear the same messages. What's the reality?
The reality is no, it's not. It just kind of changes. It shifts, like kind of what Bobby was saying, right? So we've seen so since we're such a high tourist area, just like you guys are, we have a ridiculous amount of auto burglars. But these auto burglars are organized. They're part of like the organized theft, ring too, right? Because they all go to the same people to sell it, so they use a fence, right? So they're very coordinated. But what we're seeing that is really high. But we're seeing an uptick with violent crime, like for street robberies, with weapons, with guns, which also can translate to a shooting if the victim is not cooperative. And we're seeing more of an uptick now with that.
Yeah. God, I got to say, it sounds like us here at home. I mean, just looking at what is being reported, let alone the other incidents that are not. You mentioned that drugs seem to be the common ground, the foundation from which a lot of this springs forward. I don't want to get too much into detail, but I'm a mad supporter of President Trump's policies on the southern border. And under the Biden administration, not to get political, but the reality under the Biden administration, the huge influx of illegal criminal immigrants has exacerbated so many communities. Kevin, can we track or identify that you have an illegal population perpetrating these crimes? And Bobby and Nick, do we hold concern at all that we have a presence, if not a growing number, here in Hawaii? And Brother Kevin?
We do see, and we have seen for quite some time, Honduran drug dealers in our Tenderloin district, which is, predominantly there's a lot of homeless that gather in that district, a lot of drug use, right? And that they pretty much corner that section of the Tenderloin and selling of illegal narcotics.
Mm-hmm. And how about us? I know we've had calls about it before. Do we have a grave concern that there's a presence that's exacerbating the drug trade?
Oh, absolutely, especially when you look at the Big Island and the fentanyl problem over there. I don't know really the reason why it has increased so much on in Hawaii County, but nowadays with technology and the different ways that the cartels and stuff are bringing in the dope. Really for us, because we're in the middle of the ocean, it's just either barge or airplane or the mail.
Mm-hmm.
But the ways of transporting it in has been so sophisticated that when law enforcement catches on and finds out how they're doing it in this fashion, they already have a backup on how to do it another way, and then it takes some time for law enforcement to figure it out, and then once so it's kind of like an endless chain.
If you think about it, Bobby, you're along the route that it comes to get to Mexico, so you may be the first stop too, because it's coming from that
China,
Afghanistan, China, region of
and there's so many
of the world,
so many flights and barges that come in and drop off goods and stuff. I don't think the government has enough resources to do enough inspections or to catch it.
You're absolutely right. We are the ultimate open border state. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're just surrounded. And to be able to track that, it is already 7:28 here on the SHOPO Hour, thoroughly enjoying our conversation, concerning conversation, but I think it's essential that we have a frank conversation about this, because our big square building, our ledge, oh my gosh. I want to ask a quick question, and that has to do, just a sidebar. There were reports recently concerning a lack of ticketing, issuance of tickets by SFPD, to the point where it was within the last decade a 96% diminishment, equating to a dollar amount of estimated $4 million. I use that as the setup. What is the relationship between the state and SFPD? Because our team is, without a doubt, very closely connected, especially with this, because city and county does not retain the revenue. It goes directly to the state. Kev? So
a lot of it has to do with the narrative that's occurred over the last 6-7 years,
okay,
since Floyd. So I would say we're down 650 plus officers, right, which directly affects our traffic unit, right? So a unit that once had close to 100 now has 20 something.
Wow.
Right. So you can look at, and now their duties are responding, where they were conduct traffic operations, now are responding to accidents with, with major injuries, and then that takes a large time to conduct those investigations, the accidents. So they just don't have the bodies, right? And patrol is short as well. So that time where you would have extra time because there's more bodies working at a certain district station, you just don't have the time. And we have a very high call volume as well. So I mean, I work patrol, and you're running call to call, right? I mean, you may have some time to go get a cup of coffee and get something to eat, but we're pretty busy.
Yeah, I would imagine. Gentlemen, Bobby, Brother Nick, this sounds familiar.
So you are correct. Every citation that's issued by a police officer in Honolulu, any dollar amount fine that's associated with it goes into the state general fund and then is redistributed throughout the state from there. So our county does not directly receive any income from any citation that's issued by any officer in Honolulu. Not directly. Indirectly at some point, yes. The trickle down, we're not too sure how much the percentage would be or anything like that. To the point that was just made, when you have officer shortages, it's not just necessarily the patrol elements that get affected by it. 2 years ago in Honolulu, Robert did a press conference where he showed how the patrol districts island-wide are affected by it. Since then, the loss of officers has increased significantly. When you start to get to numbers that are that high or beyond it, everybody gets affected. It's not just the investigative units, it's the traffic units as well. And so what departments have to end up doing is essentially reorganizing their personnel to a certain extent or prioritizing what the mission is going to be. If the mission is going to be serving the public in 911 calls, which is always going to be the primary mission, then all of these other subcategories are just going to have to modify. And modify does include either reducing the amount of service that you can do or eliminating it completely. And so if a county or a state agency expects a law enforcement agency to generate some kind of revenue through issuing citations, and that the law enforcement agency isn't fully staffed or staffed to a point where it can do things efficiently, you're just going to end up losing revenue. I don't know how to say it any other way. It is a bit uncomfortable, I think, for everybody to put it in a dollar value kind of sense. But the fact is that if you expect money to come out of this and you're not investing in the personnel in order to make it happen, you can see what the consequence is going to be.
It is phenomenal hour of conversation, the SHOPO Hour, as it proves to be each and every week. We're delighted that Brother Kevin is in studio with us, Vice President of Police Union San Francisco Police Department, and Brother Bobby, President of SHOPO, and Brother Nick is the county top dog, big cheese, head of everything for Honolulu. I just read that off the paper you sent me. Is that not?
And better looking than Steve Keel.
And better looking than Steve Keel. Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that's a given. But no, Brother Steve, miss you. Hope you're doing well. We'll take a short break. It is the SHOPO Hour. If you'd like to jump in, 5-2. Once again, the SHOPO Hour is underway. Just delighted to have our team on board sharing with you. And Brother Bobby, Brother Nick, Brother Kevin from SFPD. Yesterday, I aired a Community Matters program, airs on all stations, focusing on recruitment and retention for HPD. Parker Bodie was on the program with me. And what really emerged were a couple of things. We ran through numbers, etc. But it was, what's the key? What's the key to negate the priority of individuals wanting to be a part of our police departments and everything that you guys and women have gone through in public opinion, news coverage, bias, social media BS. I mean, to put on the uniform and know that as soon as you walk out your door, there's going to be people that hate your guts and they won't be shy in expressing it. That's a tough scenario for some people to grasp to make a career of. Can we talk about recruitment and the keys? I know, fellas, we have done in the past. You mentioned over 600 officers short as of today. Kevin, what's the strategy to recruit and retain?
So with our last contract, we identified how we were losing them. Were we losing them just leaving the profession, or were we losing them to other agencies? And so since we're in the Bay Area and we've got a lot of the top, starting salaries for police in the country near there, right? So that we were identifying the places that we were losing and the demographics of the officers that were leaving. How much time did they have? Were they leaving once probation was done? Were they leaving with 5 years in? Were they leaving with 10? We were kind of seeing a little bit of it all, and we decided to attack it where we needed to address the starting salary, right? So we made up some money with the starting salary from one of their step increases. So we added $5,000 there. So it went from, I think, 105 to 110. And then we looked at longevity pay. And so traditionally a longevity pay was with an officer with 20 plus years, right? Well, we've kind of reformatted that and gave incentives at 5, gave incentives at 7 and 8 years. So adding 2 additional percent at each of those. So that's a 6% pay increase in order to keep those bodies here and show them that they're valued. We appreciate them, but we don't want them to leave, and we want them to stay. And they're also going to get step increases throughout the early parts of their career, too. So they're going to make, from the starting pay up through that, they're going to be making a significant amount of money in between those times.
And how does that parallel with us here at home, Bobby?
Well, I think that's going to be probably the same situation that we'll be facing since Chief Logan started the new recruitment bonus, the $25,000. I think in a few years, you need, just like you said, you have to look at the retention aspect of it, and how are we losing officers, whether they're going to stay the 3 years and then try and look for another agency on the mainland to lateral. I think the way you have to address it is, like Kevin was saying, you have to get the retention or the bonus to keep the officer to at least the halfway point. And now if it's 30 years, then you structure that to keep them in to at least 15 years, because, once you reach 15 years, 9 times out of 10, the person is not going to make a decision to move or lateral to another department because they're already halfway there to retirement.
So our $25,000 is over a 3-year period of time. How is that going to help retention?
Well, it's probably going to increase. I think, like Chief Joe had said, they already got an increase in applicants.
Okay.
Recently, I think I'm not too sure on the numbers, but I believe he said it was around 40 was the average, and now they're upwards over to 100. So they are getting good feedback from it.
I'm just concerned that we train our officers, and they're participatory, excellent officers. At the end of the 3 years, when the last installment is paid, does an officer then go, well, what's next? If it's not with my department, HPD is so heavily recruited. If there's an incentive that is so very attractive, I'm not questioning loyalty of officers, but it is the fundamental basics of career and compensation, and be able to live in Hawaii. Similarly, COL with San Francisco. So I'm just curious, Nick, any thoughts along those lines?
Sure. So a lot of concern has been what happens after 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Basically. I think 3 years buys us quite a bit. I think it buys us some time to sort of restructure and modify and reform ourselves. It gives us time on the union side to look at what our next contract is going to be like and the contract after that. So Kevin had spoken about how they did some assessments to sort of change what they could give to their officers. That buys us some time as well. I think if an officer is enticed by the extra money, which is a good thing, and decides to take the plunge, they may find after 2 or 3 years that this is the job that they wanted to do. It wasn't just a whim. It wasn't something that they just wanted to try out. Now they have buy-in, all right? And if we can get more things plugged in the meantime, then, hey, there's even more of an incentive for them to stay here. It is my personal opinion that this will work. I am concerned about what happens after 3 years, but we are working on
Yeah.
it. I think the department is working on it as well. And I'd just like to say this is a big step for the Honolulu Police Department. If you had asked me for a personal opinion as a union official 2 years ago, would the department do this? I would say no. Quite frankly, because that was the sentiment that I got from the department, was that at that point in time, they didn't think that this was enough of a problem to modify themselves to the point where they would offer this. Now they have, and I applaud them for recognizing it. So now we have to take more steps. That's fine. We've got the ball rolling. Let's keep it moving.
It is the SHOPO hour, 7:45 in the morning. Brother Nick, thank you very much for that. Last on this whole, with officers approaching retirement, is there incentivization for them to continue service? And if there is, what is it? If there's not, what would be effective in perhaps staving off retirements?
Well, I think that's where the challenge is right now. It's keeping all of us. I'm going to make 24 years this year. What can the department or the ERS, what can they do to keep our officers from retiring? Because a majority of them are, if you came in before 2012, once they hit the 25-year mark, they're gone. And there's many reasons for that. But that's the majority of the decisions now. You're not seeing officers stay 30, 32, 34, 35 years. Once they hit that mark, they can retire.
Yeah.
They're going. So I think that's the challenge. What can the department do to try and keep the officers in? And I think the union does bear responsibility for that, and maybe suggest solutions through our contract. There's probably a lot of innovative ways that we can come up with during negotiations to try and solve that problem, to help on the back end and keep our experienced officers in, because that's a major portion of it too. You have all the experienced officers leave, then you have nobody to train the young ones that are coming in and pass on that wealth of knowledge of serving the community. So it's a big part of the equation.
I want to turn it to Kevin. We're already running behind, but I want to make sure, Kevin, your thoughts on this aspect, but also an element that's been shared on this program and elsewhere is does leadership at all levels, state, city and county, municipal, is there a belief that officers have that they've got their back? In other words, support being provided by, articulated, even just spoken policy, that element that, hey, these are the guys that are in charge. I know they got my six. On both counts, Kevin, your thoughts?
So, leadership from our department, to a degree, yes. Leadership from the elected officials. We have a dynamic with our board of supervisors that's a little tough, being majority currently are on leaning progressive, right, where we've got less than a majority are moderates. So that is in which also controls our police commission, which affects policies and discipline, and how officers are if they've done something and go in front of them, how they deal with them, which discipline wise hasn't been the worst. The chief issues a fair amount of discipline himself, coming from LA, so we have an LA chief. So that in itself isn't bad, but our policies have really taken a hit in the last 7 years plus.
Yeah.
And for retention in the 30 years, we're going to be looking in, because a lot of departments around the nation have the drop program, which identifies and keeps officers around for an extended period, depending on how long you make that plan, right? So some have unlimited drop, some have 10 years of drop. That's a deferred retirement option plan. But for us, we're a charter city, so we have to go to the voters for that. It's not something we can negotiate with the hierarchy of the city.
Parallels, gentlemen? Nick, Bobby?
Well, we were trying to pitch the drop program 2 years ago, and the ERS, the retirement system, came out, against it, and really gave strong testimony in the legislature, and the square building basically, shut it down. It has to do with the statute and some things in there, the way it's worded. But I think we can work through it and come out with some kind of package that would be like a drop program. And I know I've spoken to a lot of officers who are ready to retire, that if that were something that were to pass, they would absolutely stay.
Wow.
Yeah,
Goodness.
absolutely.
It's already 7:51. Amazingly fast hour. As always, on the SHOPO Hour, we'll get together and have some final thoughts, topics before we go, but it's already... We have just a few moments remaining, and delighted that Brother Bobby, Brother Nick, and Brother Kevin are in studio with us. And Kevin, I want to thank you for being with us on the program.
Yeah, this has been great.
Really enjoyed. Thank you. Brother Bobby, recent news headline. It involves a police chief, a firearm, and a bathroom. What's this story about?
Well, I guess a couple of weeks ago, the Kauai police chief had used the restroom inside the station, and after he was done, he forgot that he left his firearm in the restroom stall, in between the handlebar and the wall.
Ooh.
And so another detective went in there a short time later to go use the restroom and found the firearm, and they tried to figure out who it was. So they researched it by running the serial number, found out it was the chief's firearm. So they did the proper thing to do and make a found property case and submit it into evidence for safekeeping. It took the Kauai chief 8 days to take responsibility for that. The chief's office was asked for a comment by the media for the news story that they were going to run, and he didn't give any explanation for it. As a leader for any organization, whether it's Walmart, whether it's Costco, whether it's the police department or the police union, you as a leader should take responsibility if you make a mistake and own up to it. And then, move on. When we talk about police chiefs, especially number one, the police chiefs are responsible for disciplining our members, our officers. So basically it's judge and jury. And if our officers do something wrong, it's the police chief that has the final say in what that discipline is. And so if you're going to judge others by giving them 5, 10, 15-day suspensions, including termination, then when you make a mistake, then you need to be held accountable as well. But in his statement that when he did take responsibility, he still tried to point the fact out that the restroom is a secure restroom at the station where you need to be scanned in, which it's not. The restroom is located in a secure area of the station, but it's still accessible by the public when they're let in. So when the police station, when the officers give tours to school groups, 15 kids at a time, and they're bringing them up to that location to tour the station, if any one of those 10 to 12-year-olds have to use the restroom, that's the restroom that they're going to use. So imagine if a small kid went into the restroom and found the firearm. So it's a very serious nature. And if it was any one of our members, I guarantee you, an investigation would be started, and they would be disciplined. So whether it's the chief of police or whether you're a regular officer on the street, you should be held accountable for your actions. And that's all we have to say about that. That's all we're asking for, is the police commission to hold the chief accountable for that.
Nick?
Yeah, if I might add to Robert's point, a rank and file officer, a line officer who got caught in that kind of situation, whether it was on duty or off duty, depending on the venue, not only would you be looking at the administrative disciplinary charges, but I guarantee you that if the department could throw in some criminal charges as well for negligent storage of a firearm, any enhancers that you would use for any other criminal, like let's say theoretically semi-automatic weapon, large capacity magazine, all of those kinds of things. Not necessarily that they would apply per se, but what I'm saying is that people would be looking for everything they could possibly throw at that officer. Everything. That officer could essentially be ROPA'd, pending a criminal investigation, maybe even possibly prosecuted.
I don't mean to cut you off, but it brings back a year or two ago when Deputy Chief Stan Olson from KPD took his firearm to the X-ray machine at the airport. There was nothing done about that.
Yeah.
Nobody was held accountable.
Yeah, and police stations are secure to a certain extent. There's also quite a lot of civilians that go through as well. There as well, not only the civilian staff, but there are occasionally people there doing maintenance work, doing inspections and so on. I've actually handled theft cases where an officer has left something in a locker room unattended, where civilians were in there doing work and it was stolen, and we had to consider the civilians as suspects as well.
Goodness. I'm afraid we've reached our time. Maybe next week we can follow up on status of this particular case. But we want to really thank Brother Kevin for being with us. Hope you enjoy the rest of your stay, and all the best to you and your team back in the city.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Brother Bobby, thank you as always.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks, Kevin, for coming in.
And Brother Nick, thank you much.
Thank you.